For many South Africans, the law doesn't feel like protection. It feels distant, complicated, and out of reach. Basically, something to fear rather than something meant to serve them. Welcome. I'm Pamela Morare, and this is Democracy Talks. So today we are asking a very important question. How do we build trust between legal systems and the people it is meant to serve? And today, joining us today, is someone who's actively shaping the future of law in South Africa, Mr. Aziz-Ismail, who is the leader in the legal innovation, technology, and AI, the chairperson of the Johannesburg Attorneys Association, and also someone who's recognized as one of the male and guiding 200 young South Africans in 2025. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's an honor.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's really the honor is mine to be here and to talk about such an important topic.
Yeah, thank you so much. So let's get to the questions. So the first question would be, when we talk about trust in the legal system, what does that mean to you or look like?
It means being confident of being heard, being seen, and being represented. I think that trust in the legal system should mean that.
Okay. So building up to that question, why do you think so many South Africans feel disconnected or intimidated by the legal system in South Africa?
So there's a few different reasons why people feel intimidated and disconnected from law. And I think the first stems from the history of South Africa and the apartheid history, where law was not something that protected you, right? It was something that segregated you and that hurt you. So there's this history already that comes for those who've experienced apartheid, that law is not on your side. And yes, we've now far short apartheid. We are in the prime of our democracy. But at the same time, where are we? We're in a position where the trust has not fully been gained. And that's because law can sometimes seen as expensive, slow, inaccessible. And again, going back to that background of law being something in the past which was used to oppress people. And if we look at the global scale right now as well, while we're in the prime of our democracy and the law is there to support us and is there to help us, looking at what's happening in the global space as well, there are some examples of really good application of law where it supports people and human rights, but we're also seeing examples of where the law is seen as applied to some and not applying to others. So it's an interesting space, and it's all of these different local and international dynamics that is really steering what trust looks like in the legal system. But I think it's something that can definitely be overcome if we look at it from the right perspective.
Okay. So you've mentioned some of the barriers in accessing the legal system in South Africa, right? But let's expand it a bit. What are some of the biggest barriers that prevent people from accessing legal help?
I think it can often be misconception. And there's a misconception that the law is always expensive and inaccessible.
True.
And to a degree, it can be argued that that could be true. But I think we've got phenomenal systems in the country that actually help bridge that gap and break away that misconception. So from different university law clinics to work done by Legal Aid and probono.org, and really creating that access to justice where you can get quality legal representation and assistance just at a base level, that can help bridge that gap on that inaccessibility from a cost perspective. The other element that ties in is around slowness. It's no secret that the legal system has procedures that needs to follow, and we've got a high volume of cases, and different areas experience these timeframes differently, and that's based on the concentration of where those matters are heard. So, for example, if you've got a case in Gauteng, right, we've got 2 divisions of the High Court in Gauteng, And that's where a lot of volume of work is. It's not saying that the cases are not in other provinces, because they are high volume in those other provinces as well. But the challenges in each province are presented differently. For some provinces, another big challenge in terms of accessibility is going to be accessing the actual court. And that's where, again, I think there is a misconception that you always need to go to the High Court and you always need to pay these heavy fees, and really understanding your position and transforming it into where's the right place to go. Having that basic understanding of one, where's the right place to go and how do I access it? So going into your local law clinic that's available in your township, being able to access law that way, understanding that small claims court could be a way to go, or magistrates court that is a way to go. So there are ways to access law, but there are instances where there is that distance, there is that time that's required, and that requires people to take off from work, which is where you earn your income, to be able to resolve these disputes. So that's a whole other factor that ties into some of these barriers. And what complicates this even further is because there's this misunderstanding that, is it really going to protect me? Is it really going to help me? People then shy away from seeking that assistance. And the last thing, I think, is going to go down to really not fully appreciating and understanding our rights. Because South Africa, we've got one of the best, actually the best constitution in the world. And our Bill of Rights gives us so many rights that we often don't understand, and we often don't realize that using those rights we can uplift ourselves and, importantly, uplift our communities.
Thank you so much for that. So let's take it back to why we're having this conversation today, right? The mission behind Democracy Talks, which is to talk about complex law issues in a plain, simple language, right? So my question would be, how can legal professionals make the law more human, more relatable, and easier to understand?
I'm laughing and smiling to myself because I know I can sometimes be guilty of this, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. The legal industry is an industry that's one that's enshrined in tradition, in prestige, right? And there's this perception that lawyers speak, operate, and engage in a very high and different level. What often happens when you're looking down to the community then is that there is a mistranslation of language used by lawyers and language used by the community. And there's no harm in speaking in legal jargon and high language, but there needs to be an understanding from a lawyer's perspective that who your client is. Understanding your client, understanding that English may not be their first language, right? Also understanding that not everyone, even English-speaking people, may not understand some of the high-level jargon that's used. I'm a person that's guilty of that. I love to speak in legalese, and there is a time and place for that. But there are instances when you're communicating with your clients that we need to actually speak in plain language and speak in a way that we explaining the process. Because what can be part of the frustrating part of this is not understanding why something that seems so simple is taking so long. So one, it's being able to explain in plain language what the problem is, what the process is, but then also communicating what those timelines are and why it takes that time. Because the wheels of justice take time, but there's a reason behind it. We need to protect everyone's rights, not the rights of any individual. And that is why there is a process that needs to take place. But making sure that that process is communicated, the reason for that process is communicated, and how that process follows, the anticipated time periods in plain language, the probability of success in certain instances where you can advise on that needs to be explained. Explaining to a client that yes, you have this right, right? But that right is balanced against the right of another person, right? And finding that balance, finding something that's fair, finding something that's equal takes time. So really the main message is that legal practitioners should be more clearer and transparent and in plain language. It's not, we are quite transparent. We are a regulated industry that does need to talk about the transparency from a cost perspective, from a timelines perspective, but there's often that mistranslation between what we're saying and what the client ultimately understands. And it does go back to understanding who your client is. If your client works at a multinational corporate who is used to corporate jargon thrown around all the time, right, will probably understand what you're saying, versus a client who works in a hardware store or who works in a standard business, not in a corporate environment, who's got high school level education, who grew up in a disadvantaged community, who did not grow up speaking English, because that's another thing. Language can sometimes be that barrier. We take it for granted that everyone understands English, but we don't fully comprehend that for a lot of people, it's not their first language. We grew up in another language, and for them, there is nothing wrong in expressing themselves in that language, but then translating that expression to English in a way that comes across that you want it to come across. So all of those different elements tie in as barriers, and how we move over those barriers is being able to sit with one another and speak in a way that really translates to one another. And it's not something that's only seen in South Africa, because there's an international movement around the use of plain language in legal when it comes to contracts, when it comes to engagements. So back to my point for the last time, it's time and place on when and how you use that language based on your audience.
Okay. My next question is very similar to the one that I asked, and I think you answered already. But just to expand it and maybe, touch on what you didn't touch on, what role do young legal professionals play in changing how the public experiences the law?
So this is something that's quite important, and it's going to come down to education. We're in the information era, right? Information is available at the touch of our fingertips. It's available through generative AI. It's available through social media. And this is where young legal practitioners can come in and use our platforms to educate people. So beyond providing your legal services, where you're charging for legal services, which you should be doing, but there are elements where you're sharing basic knowledge which everyone should understand. So using social media to share, for example, what does POPIA mean for you? What does personal information mean to you? How does it impact me in the street? How does it impact me or how does it impact another person if I humiliate them or degrade them on social media or spread lies about them on social media? What is that impact? As an example, right? Having an understanding of what the law is, what your rights are. And there's a lot of movements that are taking place right now on legal education through social media. One that's really cool and that I'm really enjoying is seeing We the People. They're based in Braamfontein at the Constitutional Court, and they've got a constitutional literacy program. Again, foundations that are important. We need to be a people that understand our constitution, understand our rights. So that's something that's really cool that's taking place.
Democracy Talks as well. Please include that.
Exactly. Of course. Democracy Talks is a way of education. So education is one way. The other way of communicating goes back to my earlier points around that, how we communicate, and really tying that in through education and community empowerment. And the last bit, and I think it's something we should not forget, is engaging as legal practitioners with associations, engaging with organizations that really drive that community access and that help uplift and empower communities. So, for example, volunteering and spending hours towards pro bono with different organizations that are available that's out there. Giving your time towards that as a lawyer is quite important because it's giving back to the communities that need.
Thank you for that. So you are in the tech space.
Yes.
Yeah, let's get into it.
I'm excited, really excited. You're going to have a hard time stopping me from talking once we go into this
Tech
space.
Okay. So how is technology changing the way everyday people access legal system in South Africa? Services.
So the first way is, like I said, we're in an information era. A lot of information is available at your fingertips. That does not necessarily mean that information is correct, right? So that is a possible negative impact, but that's where, to the previous point, that education comes in, understanding the tools that's available out there. But today, if you go on your phone and you're using a piece of technology, right, you actually have the capability to get quick answers that can support you, but more importantly, direct you to an attorney where you need assistance, because you could not understand who's the right type of attorney to go to for a different type of problem. For example, a lawyer who could assist you in a criminal matter might not be able to assist you in a labor-related matter. Understanding, using technology to understand your rights and when you need to engage legal services, so you make sure that you're protecting yourself, you're protecting your community. I think that's quite important in where technology comes in. But we're also seeing technology come into places which makes legal information verifiable and more accessible. So there's a number of tools that's available, that's out there in the market. One that comes to mind for me is something that I've seen. I personally have not used it. I can't tell you whether it's good or not, but it comes from good people with good intentions, and that's called My AI Lawyer. So they're working on something that's affordable, a WhatsApp chat available where you could chat with WhatsApp and it could provide you with some basic reliable information. It's a monthly fee that they charge for it, that's in a nominal amount, trying to make that law a lot more accessible. So that's one such example, but that's available through there's so many different other tools that's out there depending on your needs that you could sort of look at and try and see. I was speaking with another vendor trying to enter the market, and again, their entire aim is on access to justice, trying to make sure that everyone in the country, everyone on the continent actually, would be able to access justice, because justice is now really going to be accessible based on the information you have, being able to gain access to a lawyer. Do I have a right that I can stand on? Is there someone who can represent me? Is it worth spending the money that's coming in on this, or should I just carry on? What is also the societal and cultural impact of me speaking about different things? If I'm speaking about domestic abuse, how is it impacting me in my society? So that is another element that needs to be addressed through other ways, not necessarily only technology. But there's a lot of coaching that's available using technology. Education empowerment is available through social media. But with those tools and that power comes understanding how it works, and comes understanding the constraints of those tools. For example, if I'm using a generative AI tool and I'm putting information into the generative AI tool, there's a few elements that come in. If I don't understand the tool and where it's getting the data from, I'm going to be gaining access to information that might not be relevant to South Africa, or I'm going to be gaining access to incorrect information through something called hallucinations. What could also happen is if I'm really in a really sensitive spot and I've got something which is like privileged information, and that basically means if I go to a lawyer and I share that to a lawyer who is representing me, that is protected by something called attorney-client privilege. Now, I've not engaged the services of a lawyer, and I've put that information out there using a piece of technology. How is it impacting me? Right? Because you've now shared that information with someone other than yourself, and with someone who's not your attorney, who can give you that protection. So not understanding those elements of technology,
where that data goes.
Exactly. So that all impacts, and it's going to go back to my point, education.
So you mentioned that law professionals need to start going to the people, right, and use the already existing tools such as social media to speak about these matters, simplifying the law and everything. So, if you could open your own podcast, what topics or what would you basically talk about?
So, I mean, it's topics that you guys are canvassing here at Democracy Talks, right?
Okay.
But it's hard for me to give you a straight answer to that, because every lawyer, and I think this is a misconception as well that comes with law, not every lawyer can talk to you about every single problem, right? So if I were to open my own podcast, it would be having the right guests to talk about the different topics that impact different people in society, because we are a diverse society, right? Sure. We are also a very unequal society, and problems that people in a township or rural area may face would be different from someone in an urban area could be facing. And again, something that someone faces in a personal context is very different from a professional and employment context. And so there's different lawyers with different types of specialities. But in an ideal world, I'd look to have a conversation or a series with different guests where we moderate discussion, and that discussion is moderated from different perspectives, because often, whether you're a lawyer or a member of a public, right, and it's also very important for the public to remember this, members of public, we often are so locked into our perspective, we don't understand the other perspective, and it could be that I'm right and the other person's right, and there's a middle ground that we find. Right? There could be that, nope, only one person is right. So there's different ways to look at things. So I would have a podcast where different weeks there's different themes. So you'd cover themes from basic labor issues, and when you're covering those basic labor issues, you need to have a balanced view. So what are the challenges that employees face, and have an expert on that panel who's a lawyer who can talk from the basic employee perspective. But then you have the flip side for employers. I could be a small business owner. I could be a large corporate business owner. What are challenges that I face? What are regulatory constraints that I face? How do I deal with these things? How do I deal with things where you may have a disgruntled employee? So that is one example. Other examples you could canvass is from a criminal perspective. I've been wrongly accused. Or you could have a civil perspective. I got injured and it was as a result of someone else's negligence. What are my rights? Having to understand that balance.
So right? Looking at people's experiences and coming...
Exactly.
Okay.
It's the people experience and giving those perspectives, but different experts joining in, covering different elements and different segments for different challenges for the different types of people we have in our beautiful South Africa.
Amen. So, how does the future of law look like, especially for people who have never engaged with the legal system before? How does it look like?
There's so much to unpack with that question, because the future of law is changing with technology and how it's accessible is changing. We're moving from a space, and it's not going to happen in the short term. It's going to happen in the long term, right? Where the billing models, the way that we work, the output of lawyers, the need of lawyers is definitely going to stay. But with the rise in technology, with changing and evolving technologies and transformation that's taking place, how those legal services are delivered and charged for is going to be different. So I think that's the first thing to understand is law in itself, forget engaging with law, but law in itself is going to transform. And it's going to transform in a positive way. It just requires us who are the lawyers to adapt to it and change and be flexible to that change. And that is something we're starting to see, right? So, but it's not going to be an overnight change. With regards to communities engaging with lawyers, right, that's also potentially going to change. But those changes are going to have to come with changes in laws and how engagements can take place. But I think one of the key ways that this could work is with law and lawyers being a lot more accessible through internet. You're going to see a lot more law firms, for example, rolling out chatbots as value adds to their clients. You're going to see, and we're starting to see this, community-based service centers for communities are also going to be able to roll out into remote areas where there could be people providing support on a basic level, for example, from a paralegal space or paralegal level, or from even a junior attorney level, providing that general assistance that is being provided today, but with more capabilities, because the technology provides you that. But with that technology, with those capabilities, with that information, comes great responsibility on the part of the legal practitioners, because we need to make sure that as we adapt and use technology, we're also using it responsibly, appropriately, and very importantly, in accordance with the code of ethics and the code of conduct of the legal profession. Because, and I'm going to take us one step back. There is a misconception that lawyers are dishonest, right? There is this misconception that lawyers they say lawyers are liars, and that is not true, right?
Sorry.
That is not true. They are a very small handful of people that have led into that perception, but that is not a reflection of the profession. As a profession, we have a duty to the truth, to the courts, and to the public, because as attorneys, we are officers of the court, right? We use the information that is truthful and factful to represent the interests of our clients, right? And to do that at the best of our abilities. So we need to be careful as we bring technology in, that the lawyers that are using the technology to support them, because that's what it's there for, and that's the most it can do. It can support you, right? To use it in a way that we are not falling prey to not understanding the tool, the constraints of the tool, and how that tool works. So if we use a tool without understanding, or if we use generative AI without verification and due diligence, because we're seeing a lot of hallucinated case law that's coming out into the market, where South Africa has had about 3 instances in court about this, on the negative side of using AI in law. But I just read a report recently that in America there were about over 800 court filings, in America alone, where incorrect information was filed at court because no proper supervision, verification, and due diligence took place. So it's something that now turns to legal practitioners, and we need to make sure that as lawyers we're understanding the tools that we're using, and we're using them responsibly and ethically and appropriately. So there's this balance that's going to come in, but it is quite important that we use the technology. We don't shy away from it, because we're only hurting ourselves if we don't. But there's going to come back to the importance of community, responsibility, and accountability.
Okay, I'm so glad that you spoke about the misconception around, trusting lawyers and everything, because my next question is about that. So if the legal profession had to do one thing differently starting today to rebuild trust, what would it be?
I think to help rebuild trust with the communities is to connect with our communities. Really, when we're speaking with our clients, being transparent, and it's not to say we're not being transparent, but be transparent in a way that uses plain language. Using that plain language in our transparency takes us back to that foundation and the clear understanding of how that works. And not only being transparent and using plain language when we're engaging with you as a client, because by then you've already have some element of trust in the law that you're engaging legal services, but also taking that step back and talking about these different challenges from the lens of social media. Talk about what your rights are. Talk about it in a way that is understandable. And also, understandable is one bit. Talk about it in a practical and relatable way. And when you build that connect, that first connect is going to help bring in the trust.
So for someone listening right now, to our audience, who feels unsure or even afraid of engaging with the law today, what is one simple way or step they can take to feel more confident in the legal system in South Africa?
Don't be afraid to ask. We don't bite. The legal industry, I know we have a lot of decorum, we have a lot of tradition, and we may come across in a certain way because we do need to represent the interests of you and the public and the legal system. But that doesn't mean you can't ask a question. If you don't understand something, ask. And if you don't understand it again, ask again, because we are here to help you and to support you. And the law is meant to be accessible, and access to justice is something that's so important, and it's something that we're trying to drive. So for example, through the Johannesburg Attorneys Association, we're working on empowering access to justice through education as well as digital transformation, where we're working to empower lawyers in connecting with communities using education and technology. So yeah.
So last question. What gives you hope about the future of legal system in South Africa?
People.
People.
The people we have in the legal industry, the people that I've been able to engage with in the legal industry, are people that are empathetic, are kind, are people that give me hope in a diverse and comfortable future for South Africa, and that the public can have a trust in.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Now you know that lawyers are not all liars. Okay, no, sorry.
We're not liars at all.
Not liars. That was a very insightful conversation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience has learned a lot as well. So what's clear is that rebuilding trust in the legal system starts with making it more human, more accessible, and more responsive to realities people face every day. So that was very insightful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Until the next one.